The hum of fluorescent lights was the only companion to the silence that hung over the highway-side gas station. It was 2:38 a.m., and the desert outside stretched endlessly beneath a crescent moon. The sign above the building flickered. All-night fuel. Half the letters dim, like they'd given up years ago. Inside, Raina Cross wiped down the coffee station for the third time that hour. The only customers she'd had since midnight were a drunk college kid buying beef jerky and a trucker too tired to speak. She didn't mind. The quiet suited her. Raina was in her 40s, lean and weathered, with sharp eyes and short-cropped hair. A faded Marine Corps tattoo peeked out from under her sleeve. She didn't talk about the war, or about her son. That was a door long closed. People in town knew enough not to ask. She didn't work the graveyard shift for the money. She worked it for the silence, for the isolation, for the way the dark hours kept memories buried. But on that night, the darkness came looking for her. The bell above the door jingled. Two men stepped in, hooded sweatshirts, black jeans, gloves. They moved stiff, purposeful. One went straight to the counter. The other hung back, near the candy aisle, pretending to browse. Raina didn't flinch. Coffee's hot, bathroom's out of order. The man at the counter didn't answer. He reached into his hoodie and pulled out a pistol. Hands where I can see them, lady, now. Raina raised them slowly. You sure you want to do this? The man blinked, thrown for just a moment by the calm in her voice. We want the register, fast. Raina's eyes flicked toward the second guy. Taller, more jittery. He was keeping watch but looked unsure, scared. Probably no more than 20. Look, I get it, she said. You're broke. You're desperate. You're not thinking straight. So I'm going to give you one chance to walk out that door. The man slammed the pistol on the counter. Don't play tough. But he didn't know who he was talking to. In one swift motion, Raina grabbed the coffee pot and hurled it at his face. The glass shattered, boiling liquid splashing across his eyes. He screamed. She vaulted the counter and drove her elbow into his throat. He went down, gasping, choking on heat and pain. The second man drew a sawed-off shotgun from under his coat, eyes wide. Raina was already moving. She lunged low, grabbed a metal mop handle from behind the door, and swung it like a spear. It cracked against the barrel of the shotgun, sending it flying. The kid stumbled back. She pounced, twisting his arm, slamming his head against the cigarette shelf until he dropped. Blood pooled on the tiles. Both men groaned in agony. Raina stood over them, breathing steady. Then she noticed something. The pistol on the floor. It wasn't street trash. It was military grade, clean, unserialed. And the tattoo on the wrist of the one she'd burned, an ink scorpion with a crown. Her gut turned cold. She knew that mark. Cartel. Suddenly, her burner phone behind the register buzzed. Only 2 people had that number. One of them was dead. She picked it up. A voice crackled through. You made noise, Raina. Her hand tightened around the mop handle. You should have stayed invisible. Then the line went dead. And the gas station lights flickered out. The gas station went black. No hum of lights, no flickering signs. Just Raina's breathing and the faint metallic drip of blood from the busted kid's nose. Outside, the desert wind howled, kicking up sand across the parking lot like a whisper of what was coming. Raina didn't move. She listened. A faint engine idled somewhere nearby. Low, heavy, muffled. Not a customer. A stakeout. She knew the sound. Vate, custom exhaust. Likely a late model SUV. Cartel convoy standard. They were already here. She dragged the 2 downed men behind the counter and zip-tied their wrists with cable from the supply closet. They'd live. She wasn't a killer. Not unless she had to be. Then she moved fast. From the mop bucket in the back room, she pulled a small locked toolbox. Inside, a SIG 229 pistol, 4 loaded mags, a flip phone, and a lighter. The grip still had her son's initials carved into it. TC. She strapped the gun to her hip and grabbed a ratty tan duffel from the locker in the back. The SUV doors opened outside. Reyna stepped into the shadows behind the slushy machine just as the front door exploded inward. Two men in full tactical gear entered. Not street-level thugs, hired professionals, night vision rigs mounted on their helmets. One carried an M4, the other a silenced submachine gun. Reyna kept perfectly still. The taller one spoke Spanish into his comms. Gasolinera secured. Two down, woman not in sight. Moving to sweep. Reyna reached into her back pocket and palmed her son's Zippo. She flicked it open, dropped it into the slushy basin. The syrup caught fast. Whoosh. Fire licked up the counter and erupted into a swirling blaze. The gunman turned, shouting. Reyna burst from the shadows, double-tapped the first in the chest. His body crumpled before he hit the ground. She rolled over the coffee bar as bullets shredded the soda machine behind her. Glass rained down. Fire spread. The second man shouted, "Too slow." Reyna came up beneath his line of fire and drove her shoulder into his ribs. The M4 clattered to the ground. She grabbed his helmet, twisted hard, and slammed him against the burning register. He sagged to the floor, smoking, unconscious or dead. The fire alarm screamed as the gas station began to burn. She kicked open the back door, duffel slung over her shoulder, and ran out into the open desert. The SUV was parked 100 feet away, still running. She didn't hesitate. 2 shots, front tires blown. Another, driver's side window. The man inside slumped. She opened the rear door. Inside, black bags, guns, cash, and a sat phone blinking with a GPS signal. She grabbed it and bolted. 30 seconds later, the gas station exploded. The shockwave threw her to the dirt, her ears ringing, heat licking her back. She rolled onto her elbows and looked back. All night fuel was gone, nothing but flame and steel and smoke. Her life was officially over. 40 minutes later, abandoned trailer, 10 miles out. Reyna poured hydrogen peroxide over the cut on her forearm and gritted her teeth. The sat phone rested on a crate nearby. She had it connected to her old military tablet, a gift from a friend who now worked off-grid. She scanned the last transmission. The coordinates traced to northern Mexico, a warehouse, part of a larger network. Cartel, specifically, Los Cazadores, the Hunters. She hadn't heard that name in almost 7 years. Back then, her son Tyler had joined a unit that intercepted smuggling operations on the border. One night, things went wrong. Intel failure. Ambush. Tyler never came home. Los Cazadores had denied involvement. Now she had proof. "Looks like we're not finished, baby," she whispered, holding his Zippo. Her burner phone buzzed again. New number. Untraceable. She answered. "You survived," the voice said. "You're already a problem." "I've been a problem my whole life." Silence. Then, "You should run." "I already did. Once." She hung up. Reyna holstered the cig, zipped the duffel shut, and looked out at the burning orange horizon. They had come for the wrong woman. Now she was going to war. The next night, Reyna stood in the shadows of a crumbling motel just 5 miles north of the border. Neon lights buzzed like flies around the sign. El Viento Inn. Weekly rates. No questions. Her clothes were different now. Jeans, a faded black hoodie, and a ball cap pulled low. Her gear was packed tight in the tan duffel, including 3 new weapons taken from the cartel SUV. She ditched the sat phone after extracting what she needed, burned it in a trash drum behind a Denny's, too risky to keep. Now she was working on the next move. Inside the motel room, maps and files were spread across the bed. Polaroid photos, shipping manifests, blacked-out routes drawn over smuggler trails between Arizona and Sonora. She'd cracked the last transmission on the cartel's sat phone. A meeting, scheduled at a ranch just across the Mexican border, codenamed El Panteon, the graveyard. It was an old narcotics depot now being used as a weapons and personnel staging hub. More than a warehouse, it was a damn fortress. And it was tied directly to her son's final mission. She stared at the grainy surveillance photo of the man who ran it. Javier Marquez, also known as El Armero, the gunsmith. Reyna recognized him immediately. He'd been a young, arrogant lieutenant a decade ago. Now he was cartel royalty, rumored to be protected by mercenaries and ex-federales. And she was going to walk straight into his teeth. Reyna drove an old blue Ford Ranger she'd bought for $1,400 cash from a rancher outside Tucson. No plates, no registration, just a few bullet holes in a tank of gas. She didn't cross through the checkpoint. That would have been suicide. Instead, she parked the truck in a ravine, donned night gear, and hiked 3 miles along a forgotten smuggler path, over boulders and dry riverbeds, under low-hanging mesquite and broken fence wire. The desert was a graveyard of its own, old clothes, rusted knives, half buried in sand. By the time she reached the edge of Sonora, the moon had dipped behind the hills, and El Panteon was aglow on the horizon. She saw it through binoculars, a sprawling ranch compound built around a gutted church and 3 steel barns. Armed men patrolled the walls. There were cameras, dogs, heat lamps, trucks with mounted 50 cals. And in the center, standing by a burning barrel with a glass of liquor in hand, Javier Marquez himself. She counted 24 armed guards. It didn't matter. She'd come prepared. She started with the transformer. A suppressed rifle round cracked through the still night and struck the box behind the west wall. Lights flickered and went out. Half the compound went dark. Men shouted. Radio chatter erupted. Then came the second shot from the water tower behind the hill. A guard on the roof dropped before he could raise his rifle. Chaos. Reyna moved fast, low and quiet. She slipped through the breach in the northern wall she'd scouted earlier. 2 guards passed by her blind. She cut one down with her knife, took the other's weapon, and moved toward the barn. Inside, she found crates stacked with rifles and high-caliber ammo to arm a small army. She rigged C4 charges she'd taken from the SUV stash. 1 minute. 2. Explosions shook the earth. Fire bloomed from the barn like a volcanic roar. Men scattered, dogs barked, gunfire erupted. And Reyna stepped out of the smoke like a phantom. She took cover behind an armored SUV, dropped 3 guards with rapid fire, and pushed toward the old church. Inside, Javier waited with 3 mercs, shotgun raised. "You really came alone," he said, stunned. "I don't bring backup," she said coldly. "I bury them." The firefight was short. 3 mercs down. Javier tried to flee through the side door. Reyna chased him through the chapel ruins, up a staircase, onto the roof. They faced each other in the moonlight, weapons raised. "You killed my son," she said, voice cracking just once. "He was a soldier. It was war." "No, it was a message. You made him a warning. I read the files." Javier smirked. "Then you know what's coming." "Yeah," she whispered. Then she shot him through the heart. He collapsed, whispering something in Spanish she didn't bother to hear. She stood over him, burning with a rage 10 years old. And then the night fell quiet. Reyna sprinted through the desert as cartel reinforcements arrived. She'd triggered the GPS she'd hidden in Javier's belt. It was broadcasting his location to Interpol and 2 friendly U.S. intelligence agents from a lifetime ago. The ranch would be raided before dawn. But she wasn't waiting for it. She disappeared back across the line, blood on her hands, a wildfire behind her. 3 days later, the town of Marrow Creek baked under a steel-gray sky. A dry wind rolled in from the desert like a curse, and with it came a feeling Reyna hadn't known since Kandahar, a calm too quiet to trust. She sat on her porch just outside town, the old farmhouse her father had left her after the war. The porch wood creaked under her boots as she watched the horizon. One hand cradled coffee. The other rested on the cig in her lap. She had torched Javier Marquez's compound to the ground. The Interpol bust followed within hours, 27 arrests, and a half-dozen dead. The U.S. agencies cleaned it up, buried it under bureaucratic ash. But Reyna knew the truth. This wasn't over. Javier had brothers, friends, blood debts. and the cartel didn't care about borders. That afternoon, a message delivered. The first sign came just before dusk. Her mailbox exploded. Not enough to kill, just to send a message. Pieces of charred metal rained across the driveway. Smoke curled into the air. She walked out, stared at the crater, and saw what they'd left in the ashes. A small patch, embroidered scorpion wearing a crown. The same one she'd seen on the wrist of the robber in the gas station. Los Cazadores were here. Reina went to the garage, pulled the tarp off a crate she'd hoped to never open again. Inside was a locked steel case marked "Property of the U.S. Government." She entered the code. Inside, an M4 carbine, her old recon headset, 4 magazines, and a Kevlar vest. The war was on her doorstep now. At 11:47 p.m., a convoy of 3 blacked-out SUVs crept into town. No headlights, no plates. They didn't go to her house first. They went to Danny's bar, the place her son had worked during his last summer home, a local haunt, 10 people inside. They opened fire with automatic weapons. Glass shattered, screams rose, bullets danced off neon signs. 3 killed before anyone knew what was happening. One of them was Miguel, the owner's son. The cartel wasn't after Reina. They were after Payne. She got the call at midnight. Miguel's sister, Rosa, sobbing into the line. Reina grabbed the vest, the rifle, the duffel, and left. She drove the Ranger to town, headlights off, eyes scanning every rooftop, every shadow. She didn't go to the bar. She went to the hardware store across from it, broke in through the rear, grabbed explosives, propane canisters, cable, and fertilizer. She knew how to make noise. From the rooftop, she spotted them. 6 men, spreading out, 2 entering the auto shop, 1 on overwatch across the street. She sighted him first. Crack. His body hit the shingles hard. The others reacted, raising rifles, shouting. Too late. Reina tossed a homemade pipe bomb into the alley. The explosion flipped a van and sent bodies flying. She moved fast, tactical, silent, precise, room to room, cover to cover. Her boots moved with a rhythm honed in war zones. She shot one through a window, disarmed another in hand-to-hand, and crushed his windpipe with a boot. Only one ran. She let him. Sometimes terror was a more effective message than death. The sun was rising when she pulled into her driveway, covered in blood, bruised, but alive. She stepped onto the porch and found someone sitting in the chair she'd occupied just 24 hours earlier. A man in a black coat. Cal Vega, CIA liaison, off-book, ghost of Langley. He was the one who'd helped Reina disappear after her son died. A friend. Sometimes, "You made headlines," he said, sipping from her mug. "I always do." He looked her over. Interpol raided 6 more cartel sites, all connected to Marquez. Your intel started a chain reaction. And now they're on my front lawn. He nodded. "There's more," he added. "Los Cazadores have a new head. Someone worse than Javier. They call him El Pastor the Shepherd, ex-intel, trained in Europe, cold as stone, and he's looking for you." Reina looked out over the empty fields. "So let him find me," she said. The shepherd didn't wear gold. He didn't make speeches. He simply appeared. In a private airstrip near Juarez, a man in a slate-gray suit stepped onto the tarmac, surrounded by 4 silent bodyguards. He wore gloves, carried no phone, and had the bearing of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be obeyed. El Pastor, born Raul Echeverria, former intelligence asset turned phantom. His specialty wasn't killing, it was dismantling systems, networks, lives. Rumors said he could name every DEA agent along the southern border by voice alone. Now, he had one target, Reina Cross. And he was coming, not to kill her, but to make an example out of her. The funeral for Miguel drew half the town. Closed casket. Reina stood apart from the others, her hoodie pulled up, hands in her pockets. Her eyes locked on the priest's words, but she didn't hear them. Her hearing was tuned to footfalls, engines, patterns. She felt it before it happened. A drone buzzed overhead, too quiet for most to notice, but not Reyna. A recon quad, used for forward targeting. She stepped into the aisle just as a black van barreled around the corner and screeched to a halt. Side door slid open. Gunmen in masks jumped out, full-body armor, suppressed MP5s, precision-trained. The crowd screamed. People dove. But Reyna had already drawn her SIG. Crack, crack. 2 down before they hit the grass. One swung his rifle toward a mother and her daughter. Reyna tackled him from behind, slammed his head into a tombstone, and turned the rifle on the last one. The van peeled away, but not before Reyna fired 2 rounds into the back tires. The vehicle crashed into the fence and overturned. Smoke, glass, sirens in the distance. Reyna approached the wreck slowly, barrel up, boots crunching over broken headlamps. Inside the wreckage was a box. Not a bomb, a message. She pried it open. Inside, a VHS tape, a photograph of her son, and a rosary burned at the ends. Her hand trembled as she stared at the photo. It was her son, all right, but this one had been taken in captivity. He wasn't dead when they said he was. He was taken, and they'd lied to her. She had to drive an hour to find someone who still owned a VCR. In a trailer on the edge of nowhere, an old vet named Gus ran a pawn shop full of dead tech and dying dreams. "You sure you want to watch this?" Gus asked. Reyna nodded. The tape crackled to life. It showed a grainy, dimly lit room, a man on a cot, dirty, bruised, shackled at the ankles. Her son, alive. The video was time-stamped, 3 weeks after the military reported him Kia. He looked at the camera and spoke with a broken voice. "Mom, I didn't break. No matter what they did, I kept your name safe." Then static. Then a new image, El Pastor himself. He looked into the camera like he was staring through it. "The boy never broke," he said. "So we broke him instead, and now we'll break you." The screen went black. Reyna sat there, breathing slow, her pulse thunderous. They'd taken him, tortured him, killed him, and then lied to her. Now she understood why Los Cazadores were here, why they wanted her humiliated, not just dead. They wanted her shattered, but they miscalculated. Because now she wasn't fighting out of vengeance. She was fighting for truth. She met Cal Vega again at a water station out in the canyons. "I saw the tape," she said. Cal looked grim. "I warned you. You knew he was alive." "I suspected." Reyna's voice dropped. "I'm going to burn everything tied to El Pastor. You'll need help." "I don't want help. I want access." Cal slid her a file. "This is what we've got: names, safe houses, smuggling routes, accountants. El Pastor's real weapon isn't muscle, it's money, laundering, corruption. He built a cartel like a corporation. You want to end him?" She nodded. "Then bankrupt his soul." She opened the folder. At the top, a name circled in red: Gabriel Ortega, El Pastor's money man, based in Phoenix, unprotected. She smiled without joy. It was 104 degrees in the city of sun and glass when Reyna Cross drove in. No plates, no music, no mercy. The folder Cal Vega had handed her burned a hole in her passenger seat. Inside were details: bank account numbers, laundering shell companies, private jet logs, and most importantly, Gabriel Ortega, the soft underbelly of a beast made of bullets and blood. Ortega wasn't a fighter. He was an accountant in $1,000 loafers with dirt under every fingernail, blood, money, dirt. He handled El Pastor's empire from the shadows of high-rises and digital vaults. Reyna planned to rip him into the light. She wore black from head to boot, Kevlar under her coat, her son's Zippo in her pocket. The lobby was empty. Ortega's security relied on anonymity and encrypted elevators, but Reyna didn't knock. She scaled the fire escape, climbed 17 stories in the dark, and shattered the terrace glass with a suppressed shot. The alarm screamed. Ortega was mid-shower. She dragged him out by the collar, tossed him across the marble floor. Naked, sputtering, gasping, he reached for a phone. Reina stomped it. "Do you know who I am?" he choked. "I know exactly who you are." She zip-tied him to a chair, pistol pressed to his knee. "I'm not here to kill you," she said coldly. "I'm here to bankrupt God." Ortega cracked fast. He gave up the offshore accounts, the handlers, the data centers. He even gave up El Pastor's current location, a fortified airfield in Sinaloa, where the last remnants of the Cazadores elite had regrouped, preparing to vanish underground. Reina recorded everything. She didn't kill Ortega. She handed him to Vegas people instead, with a live drive full of evidence and a whispered promise. "If he disappears before trial, I come for you next." The compound stood like a sleeping lion. Private runway, blast walls, mercenaries stationed at every blind spot. But Reina had one thing they didn't: nothing to lose. She moved like wrath through the perimeter, explosives at the hangar doors, mined the escape routes, sniper rifle perched on the control tower. At 3:14 a.m., she triggered the first blast. At 3:15, she walked through the gate with fire behind her. At 3:17, the men guarding El Pastor's bunker were dead. She kicked in the door. He stood there waiting, reading a book, calm as ever. "You burned it all," he said. "I left the part I came for," she replied. He nodded. "Then, come take it." They fought like wolves. El Pastor was trained, efficient, ruthless. But Reina was fueled by rage, by years of loss compressed into a blade edge. When it ended, they were both bloodied, both bruised. But only one walked out. 1 week later, Merrill Creek Cemetery. She stood over her son's grave. A new marker had been added beside it: Tyler Cross. Finally laid to rest, a soldier honored. She placed the Zippo on the stone, let it go. Behind her, Rosa and the townsfolk gathered for a quiet vigil. Reina turned and walked through them, not alone this time. 6 months later, a series of anonymous leaks shook governments from Tijuana to D.C. Los Cazadores fell. Interpol, DEA, and Mexican Special Forces coordinated raids based on information from an unnamed source. No one found Reina. Some say she vanished into the desert. Others say she works off-grid, burning out the last remnants of cartels across the Southwest. But in the borderlands, people whisper of a woman with steel in her voice and fire in her eyes. They call her La Madre de Hierro, the Mother of Iron, because when the war came to her door, she answered,